Hi, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Connor. I'm a science fiction, political, and philosophy nerd, a Marine Corps and law enforcement veteran, and a never-Trump Republican. Right now, we're going to be reviewing Nick the Knife Fuentes. For those of you who are unfamiliar, he's a Christian nationalist. He's a distant right-winger, which means that he's pretty stinking far right. But he's still relevant. He gets tens of thousands of young men to engage with his content on a live basis where they watch him live, and he gets hundreds of thousands of post-recorded views across multiple platforms. He's banned from most large platforms, but despite that, he's still fairly politically relevant. He has a little 20-minute takedown piece of Steven Crowder, and since these are both right-wingers who are fighting against each other in reference to the Iran-Israel conflict, I felt like it would be spicy and fun. So let's go ahead and check it out.
Past week, I've been calling out a lot of people, Charlie Kirk and Matt Walsh, and yesterday called out Laura Loomer very strongly. And tonight I want to call out Steven Crowder. I don't know if you saw this. This was so brazen and a little bit surprising. Steven Crowder's, I think, probably the biggest live streamer on Rumble, and he should be. I believe he's a co-owner here. He's one of their sponsored creators. But Steven Crowder did a show today after many months of insinuating maybe that he was more based than he really is, dropping these hints, making these little references. He did like a happy merchant meme when the JFK files came out. And there was one other thing. I don't know what it was. I forget. But I really thought that Steven Crowder was going in the right direction. I thought that he was getting better. I thought that he was...
For those of you who don't know, I'm going to show you the happy merchant. He's like, oh, I thought he was getting better. I thought he was becoming more anti-Semitic. Like, okay, Nick. I thought he was becoming more antisocial. Yeah, awesome. Yeah, this is the happy merchant. So it's, anti-Semitic meme, where the Jewish guy is excited about making a bunch of money. They make him look, like a hunchback because they accuse him of being all screwed up from incest. Like it's just anti-Semitism. So I do think it's funny that Nick is like, oh, I thought he was so based. And it's like, okay, no, you thought he was becoming more anti-Semitic. Gotcha.
Getting more based and not less. And then today he did this show. And I don't know what is going through his head. But he does this show today, Steven Crowder, Louder with Crowder. And he's hyping it up on Twitter. He's saying, I'm going to call everybody out. This is a big show. It's going to be really controversial. People have been lying to you. And I'm thinking, is Steven Crowder going to go and call out all the Zionists? I'm thinking, is he going to call out Mark Levin, who's pushing us to war? Is he going to call out Laura Loomer, who's saying if you don't support bombing Iran, you're disloyal? I said, or is it going to be some conservative nonsense? Is it going to be more typical basic bitch conservative garbage and deception? And it was the latter.
Sorry to disappoint, Nick. The actual truths are considered anti-Semitic. No. Patriarch says, how did you find my photo? No. And Adam Beasley, there are many truths that you can say that aren't anti-Semitic. You could say that Israel was started in a region that already had an indigenous population. You can say that the violence in the early 20th century is ironic considering how messed up the Holocaust was, that effectively what ended up happening in Israel was ethnic cleansing, and that was one of the sins of World War II. Then you can say, oh, well, during all these things, Israel did a bunch of preemptive strikes against its neighbors, which is, you could make a whole host of criticisms of the state of Israel. You could even go so far as to criticize like international Jewish sympathy. And what I mean by that is there's like 6 or 7 million people in Israel. Then there's 6 million people in the United States. And I think it's like 8-2, 9-1, people in the United States are sympathetic to the state of Israel. So you could say like, well, this actually has nothing to do with like spiritual Zionism and finding God. You could do all that kind of stuff if you want. And like, yeah, sure, you might get called anti-Semitic, but you can say like, no, I'm not criticizing the Semitic people through an immutable characteristic. I'm talking about the geopolitical reality of Israel. You could do that. But that's not what Nick Fuentes is doing. Okay, Nick Fuentes is not giving you some like nuanced breakdown of the geopolitical realities of the state of Israel. He's just saying Jews are bad and they control the world. So yeah, sorry, brother, but it's, you know, you're coping, especially if you're in the United States. If you're in Europe, I'm sure you could argue that like Europeans are so uncomfortable because they killed 6 million Jews. Europeans are so uncomfortable that you know, you have more censorship over there. But if you're in the United States and you think you can't be critical of the state of Israel, you're not paying attention. Haircut Commander says, laugh my ass off, MAGA really is eating itself. It's so based. I'm so happy to see the coalition falling apart. General Ballsack says, I'm Lutheran and not anti-Semitic. How do people fall for this idiocy? Because they're cringe. General Ballsack says, 67 war. I'm over it. Yep. Adam Beasley, talk about the Holodomor, where Bolsheviks, Jews slaughtered over 20 million Christians. The Jews in Israel, by and large, Ashkenazi, having zero Judean bloodlines. So number one, talk about the Holodomor when the Bolsheviks. Okay, didn't Stalin do a purge of the Jews in the Bolshevik party? Didn't he purge all the Marxist-Leninists or whatever? And then also with the Bolsheviks, we can read their history or whatever, but even if they're like 70% Jewish or whatever, aren't all of the people who actually ended up participating in the Holodomor Christians or atheists who recently became atheists because they believed in socialism? This is one of the things that, I'm sorry, this actually pisses me off. One of the things that pisses me off is let's use as an example that entertain this hypothetical real quick. Let's say that the wars of the 1980s and 70s are all like, you know, Jewish conspiracies, that us being involved in the Middle East and North Africa and deposing the Shah and all that kind of stuff. Weren't there a bunch of Anglos in charge of these operations? Weren't there a bunch of Christians involved in these operations? Isn't like Herbert Walker Bush Sr., wasn't he like in the CIA in the 60s and 70s? Wasn't he, I don't know, Secretary of State or something under Reagan, you know, something like that? I forget his exact position. Wasn't he in charge of the Iran war, or excuse me, not the Iran war, the Iraq war in the late 80s, early 90s? It's Christians executing this shit. And yet you have no heat for the Christians who are doing all the geopolitical intrigue, because it's really the Jews who are all behind it. It's cringe to me that you can't hold, I don't know, Christians or Muslims accountable for their own actions that are obviously within their own self-interest. That's the other thing that pisses me off. We're not in the Middle East and North Africa exclusively because of Israel. We might be in there because we have a little bit of sympathy and we might have aligned interests, but we're also in there because it's 2/3 of the world's proven energy reserves. It's so myopic and stupid. Sorry, Adam Beasley is, you know, one guy in me right now, but let's face it, you guys like the one guy every now and then. The Jews in Israel, by and large, Ashkenazi, having zero Judean bloodlines. Why? Because they mixed with Europeans for centuries? Shut up, man. Shut up. Oh, God, I hate you guys. So annoying. All right. Yeah. Yep. I agree with you, Paltiel Klempner. Yeah, that's all right. We can. General Ballsack says, simmer down. We didn't topple the Shah. That was the UK. Yeah. And then didn't we like immediately say, good job, guys, we'll take it from here? Isn't that exactly what happened? Didn't we tell British Petroleum and the British SAS like, hey, good job, it's our turn now? All right. Anyways. Sorry, that every now and then we'll have like a groiper pop in a chat. They'll say something that triggers me, and then I'll go on a geopolitical rant. My apologies. Let's continue.
If you caught his show, he called out Steve Bannon, Alex Jones, Tucker Carlson, Candace Owens, Ian Carroll, all of the biggest opponents of the war in Iran. And he said that every single one of them was talking about how we are in World War III. Alex Jones, Bannon, Ian Carroll, Candace Owens, that whole crew, they all said that we're hurtling towards World War III. And Crowder said, well, they were wrong. That's not true. We're not in World War III. He says, they lied to you. He said, and they lied to you because they were manipulated by the social media algorithm. This is,
I mean, probably true.
Like his hot take. He said that the left is unaccountable to the people or to the truth. He said, and just like the left is unaccountable, so too are the anti-war opposition on the right. He said, because they will prognosticate about a future World War III. They're wrong about the outcome, and they lied about this in order to get clicks on Twitter and views on YouTube. And this is a big problem that needs to be called out. And let me explain to you why that is the dumbest take possible in this conflict. Let me explain to you why that's the dumbest thing you can possibly say about the conflict.
I'm going to tell you why it's not dumb. So, number one, I'm pretty sure that at this point, Qatari money in Washington, D.C. is dwarfing Israeli money in Washington, D.C. How much is Qatar spending on lobbying DC? That's not it. $40 billion. Let's see over how long, though. America faces a silent invasion, not of armies or navies, but of capital. Qatar, a tiny Gulf emirate with just 300,000 citizens, has deployed nearly $40 billion across our nation's institutions since 2012. This is not mere investment. It is calculated influence. Benjamin Bard's meticulous investigation exposes the full scope of Qatar's American enterprise. The numbers speak plainly. $33.4 billion into business and real estate, $6.25 billion to universities, $72 million to lobbyists. So what is that? So let's just say that's 40 billion. Now, if you expand it out to business, I'm sure like Israel has a shitload of stuff as well, but Israeli money spent on lobbying US. Yes, substantial financial resources are spent by groups supporting Israel and lobbying on the campaign. I'm trying to look, but the point is that I'm pretty sure like 58 million, right? This is just lobbying though. So I would rather get more specific details about like there's weird stuff. Like there's lobbying, but there's also spending on individual campaigns. And I'm not saying that like foreign entities can spend on individual campaigns, but I'm just saying that billions of dollars are flowing from overseas into the United States in order to buy narratives, in order to make people sympathetic to different parts of the world in different ways. And if I understand the narrative correctly, Qatar has recently started in the past 5 to 10 years outspending Israel. So we're not just dealing exclusively with Israeli influence. We're also dealing with Gulf state influence as well. So you know, there's competing narratives within this thing. And one of the stories that came out recently, I think it was in the New York Post, is the fact that the Gulf states are buoying TikTok and buoying Twitter with bot armies, effectively popularizing the Palestinian and Iranian narratives because they're anti-Israel. And the way that the reason why I would be sympathetic to this narrative while not knowing the full facts of the matter is that oftentimes I'll see a tweet that says Israel sucks ass, and it'll have like 200,000 likes and it'll have like 15 comments. And you would think that if 200,000 people liked a post, then there would probably be like a few hundred comments because people would be engaging and back and forth and arguing about it and all that kind of stuff. But oftentimes that's the way that I view botted stuff is buttloads of like, zero engagement. And so I see this every single day. And obviously I'm just an anecdote. I'm just one touch point. But if that is something that's being revealed by the news, then I would not be surprised if Gulf states, pro-Palestinians, Russians, Iranians, Chinese people, I would not be surprised if they were buoying TikTok and Twitter stuff towards their own ends. Checking in with chat because I love you guys. Quick shill, like the stream, engage in chat, super chats, memberships if you got it. Bull Media Steel Dragon says, as an Eastern European, we are more concerned with bland, boring corruption. That seems like a good Eastern European thing to care about, though. Corey Peltzman says, approximately 200 U.S. colleges and universities concealed information regarding about $13 billion in unreported donations from foreign countries, with a significant portion originating from Qatar. Yup. General Balzac says, Israel has the nukes and never used them. True. Corey Peltzman says, this includes donations totaling $4.7 billion from Qatar and U.S. universities between 2001 and 2021. Yep. Christian Blair says, also Israeli propaganda effing sucks compared to Russian or Palestinian propaganda. Yeah. The Israeli propaganda is literally like boomer propaganda. It's like, we are God's chosen people. We are defending our nation. That's like Israeli propaganda. Whereas the Palestinian propaganda is like pro-Palestinian propaganda. Is like Ian Carroll is like throwing up Illuminati signs and talking about lizard people. That's an exaggeration. I know, but allow me to be exaggerative. Bull Media says, what is that money going to anyways? Whitewashing Islam? Yeah, probably a little bit. A Haircut Commander says, I'd argue we can tell Israel is spending more than Qatar at the moment because Trump's with Israel right now. No. Trump has been sympathetic to Israel the entire time. His loyalty, while potentially being mildly purchased, is not purchased. The Saudi Gulf states made his son-in-law a multi-millionaire, probably pushing billionaire, just because he's running the Saudi Sovereign Wealth Fund to the tune of $2.3 billion per year. So no, they made extended parts of his family tens upon tens of millions of dollars. Like I say, tens of millions of dollars, just because I have to assume the servicing fees on $2 billion is at minimum tens of millions of dollars. So, yeah. General Balzac says, Qatar is fine. That's where my comrades went after they got effed up, but I'm done with Qatar. No, I mean, like, there's nothing wrong specifically with random countries existing and then lobbying for influence within the United States. But it seems like Nick is rejecting that there are foreign elements of the criticisms of Israel. And I would say, even if the criticisms of Israel are well balanced and truthful, that doesn't mean that foreign governments aren't involved in criticizing Israel. I'm going to try not to get one guy. I love you guys a lot, and I want to hang out with you, and I want to talk to you. But did we kick Turkey out of NATO? No, we would never be so lucky. All right, sorry. Back to the content. We are getting more people. You know, we're basically breaking 90, and then it's hard for me to keep up with chat. I do parasocially love each and every single one of you. Like the stream, engage in chat. There's lots of really cool, funny, interesting people in there. Super chats if you got them, memberships if you got them, and let's enjoy some content together.
First, I'll say you can't exactly be mad at Steven Crowder because, and before anybody asks me, I don't think he's a malicious actor. I really don't. I think he's a well-meaning guy.
Yeah. Nick's just going to be like, oh, yeah, he's stupid, though.
I think that he's a patriot. He loves America. I think he's trying his best. But when you look at his face and you look in his eyes and you hear the way he talks and you see his graphic T-shirts, you realize this guy's really not very bright. Like, he's just really not that intelligent. He's not that funny. He's not that bright. He likes to play dress up. He likes to wear costumes. He likes to wear T-shirts. And he's got a giant fat head. And you can just sort of look in his eyes and say, lights on, nobody's home. You know, this is like golden retriever energy. It reminds me of a lot of mediocre people I went to high school with. We're not dealing with an intellectual heavyweight. So, honestly,
no objections, Your Honor. That's so mean.
Hey, I actually credit him in some ways. He's further to the right than a lot of people. He's criticized Shapiro in the past, and he's criticized Israel. And, I really think he's doing the best. But he's overclocked. He's working too hard. You can see he's struggling. You can see he's trying to put the pieces together in this Iran war like everybody is. And he's having a hard time. He's sweating. So I don't think that he's controlled opposition. I think that he really, and honest to God, we have to be honest, like, it's not his fault. Some people are just born stupid. And
this is some of the funniest criticism I've ever heard of Steven Crowder. People ask why I watch Nick Fuentes, because he's like a Christian nationalist, race realist, segregationist. That's why. The past 5 minutes have been fantastic as far as criticism of Crowder.
They're just going to be stupid all the time. Tim Pool is another one of them. Tim Pool, I see some of the clips and it's just like the way he talks. It's like you downloaded your personality from a sitcom. Like, you are an NPC, you are a robot. You are a grown man dressed up like a skater with a beanie on, saying that the real foreign entanglement is Saudi Arabia and Qatar and all this kind of stuff. It's like, unfortunately, it's just the blind leading the blind. And you can kind of see that when Tim Pool does a meetup, you can kind of see this like crowd of sweaty walking mozzarella sticks that attends his events.
I'm sorry, that's funny. I need to cough. Baby, can you feed the dogs at some point?
Sure.
Okay, thank you. Sweaty mozzarella sticks. Bro, I'm insulted on behalf of Tim Pool's audience. That is a crazy way to refer to somebody's audience. That is awesome.
It's like, this is just kind of what you're dealing with. But anyway, so.
Okay. Sorry, I was waiting for him to wrap up his rant before I checked it with chat again, because I got to see if you're having as good of a time as I am. That was awesome. Listen. He's actually racist, not trying to pearl clutch. I'm just saying that he actually just believes that races are different and they're better off when they're segregated. He's a white segregationist. He's a Christian nationalist. He wants a Christian theocracy or a Christian imperium. He's an authoritarian. He simps for people like Hitler and Stalin. But man, that 5-minute rant about how Steven Crowder is effectively like the embodiment of a golden retriever and is a moron, and how Tim Pool's audience is sweaty mozzarella sticks. That's going to live on in my brain for a while. That was awesome. All right. Corey Peltzman says Qatar and Turkey do Takia. Corey Peltzman, your talking points are like 10 years old. You need to update them, brother. Okay. So Takia is not a worldwide Muslim phenomena. Takia is exclusively Shia, and it's Shia in reference to Sunni. So for those of you who don't know, it's like 85%, 90% of the Muslim world is Sunni, and 10 to 15% is Shia. And they're mostly physically congregated around Iran. And so they've had to go out into the world and operate in Sunni territory for, economic reasons. And so lying is, of course, prohibited in general in most religions, although obviously with the Old Testament, it's a little bit stronger in Christianity and Judaism. But there was some hadith, some religious edict that basically said that Shia were allowed to lie to Sunni about their religious beliefs in order to avoid being persecuted and killed. And some asshole on the internet popularized this idea to say that Muslims can lie about how hardcore they are in order to delude kafir, in order to delude the exterior religious people about how hardcore Muslims are, so eventually they can take over society and kill them. And it's like, bro, like the world is so much more chill than that. There's so many more cool Muslims than that. Like, not every Muslim wants to kill you. Not every Muslim wants to conquer you. Matter of fact, a healthy chunk of them are just like chill, normal dudes trying to live their lives. Corey Peltzman says, Witkoff did get $600 million from Qatari investment group for a property. Not surprised. Adam Beasley says, I'm not anti-Semitic, nor am I anti-Jew. I'm anti-fake Jews. Oh my God. Shut up, Adam Beasley. Shut up. Shut up. You're quoting to me revelations in reference to the way that you're going to delineate your definitions of Jews. No one cares. No one cares. Short Stack Goblin says, how old is Nick now? Shouldn't he be able to grow a beard? I mean, he should be able to, but you know what? That's one of the things that I would love to mog Fuentes on. I would be happy to do a testosterone test, because I still think I'm like 580, 600s. I'm somewhere in like the mid to high normal. I would love to see Nick Fuentes' testosterone blood levels. Yeah. Good. Everybody's having as good of a time as I am. Jack DeArco says, Nick is funny. I am a groiper now. Okay. That's funny. All right. Okay. I'll come back to you guys, but I'm happy everybody had as much fun as I did. Good.
So Crowder says these people like Candace and Ian Carroll and the rest of them, Bannon, he said that they traffic in controversy and provocation because they're being incentivized to do this by the social media algorithm.
Yeah.
And maybe they're not doing it intentionally. Maybe they're not even cognizant that they're doing it. But it's a reward mechanism. It's like a Pavlovian response. The things that they say that are provocative get really good engagement on Twitter and YouTube. And the things that are more moderate and more sensible do not, he says. So maybe it's not even intentional. Maybe they're just conditioned over time to exploit controversy and always to take the most radical position. His proof for this is that they said we're in World War III, but we're not because of the ceasefire. And this is proof that we're not. And, you know.
Yeah. That's an underwhelming analysis. We don't know what Iran's response is going to be, and we don't know what our response to their response is going to be.
Steven Crowder's not alone. There's a lot of people that are saying this right now. The ceasefire literally went into effect less than 24 hours ago.
Yep.
Okay. 2 weeks ago, Israel launches an unprecedented preemptive attack on Iran. It's the first time they've ever carried out hostilities like this since the Islamic Revolution in 79.
I would argue that the bombing of the Iraqi nuclear facility in the 90s or the 80s, I forget which one that was. Let's take a look at it real quick, just so we can be historically well informed. So Israel bombs Iraqi nuclear facility. Operation Opera was 7th June 1981. Also known as Operation Babylon, was a surprise airstrike conducted by the Israeli Air Force on June 7th, 1981, which destroyed an unfinished Iraqi nuclear reactor located 17 kilometers southeast of Baghdad. The Israeli operation came a year after the Islamic Republic of Iranian Air Force had caused minor damage to the same nuclear facility in Operation Scorched Sword, with the damage having been subsequently repaired by French technicians. Operation Opera and related Israeli government statements followed it established the Begin Doctrine, which explicitly stated the strike was not an anomaly, but instead a precedent for every future government in Israel. Israel's counter-proliferation preventive strike added another dimension in its existing policy of deliberate ambiguity as it related to nuclear weapons capability of other states in the region. Okay, interesting. So it's not totally unprecedented, but, you know, details.
The United States enters the conflict and bombs Iran. Taken together, this is the biggest escalation against Iran in a shadow war and a proxy war, a regional war that has been going on for 25 years. This echoes about a dozen other regime change and non-proliferation conflicts in the Middle East going back 50 years. Moreover, this is happening in the context of a war with Russia in Ukraine that has no end in sight. This is happening literally simultaneously as China sent their Coast Guard and surrounded Taiwan, naval vessels on the coast of South Korea, on the coast of Taiwan, that entire island chain, aircraft carriers and everything. The ceasefire has been in place for 12 hours, and they say, well, we were right. Trust the plan. It's over. There'll never be a war again. We're never bombing Iran again. There's never going to be a global conflict. And I see everybody saying this. I see a lot of people saying, especially with regard to me, they're saying, see, Nick Fuentes was wrong. Because after Israel attacked Iran, after the United States bombed Iran, a ceasefire went into place, and it's been 12 hours, and now it's a done deal. How quickly people forget the history. Understand, how did I predict that the United States would confront Iran? And by the way, I didn't say that we would have boots on the ground in Iran. I never said that. I never said that we would be fighting a counterinsurgency in Iran for 25 years like Iraq. What I said, and you can go and watch the clip, it is from October 2023. I said what Israel is doing is they are defeating the axis of resistance in detail. First Hamas, then Hezbollah, then Assad, and it culminates in a confrontation with Iran over its nuclear program, and then regime change in Iran. Now, regime change, this is not a semantic difference. It's not a word game. We effected regime change in many countries without a ground invasion, just with airstrikes, just by fomenting civil unrest. We did it in Libya. We did it in Syria. We've done it in a lot of countries. We're doing it here. We're on the way to doing it in Iran. And
Okay. Sorry. I was going to interrupt because I was wondering if he was saying the United States, but descriptively, I'm okay with like 80% of this.
Once again, the reason I made that prediction as opposed to other predictions, the reason it came true is because I'm a student of history. And
this is the one thing I'm going to pause and engage with chat again. But this is the one thing that I almost respect about Nick is that he's talking about world history competently. We had a couple of days ago, we listened to his history of Israel, which was like a 40-minute piece, and I interrupted it and interjected it with descriptive events that I felt like he was omitting intentionally in order to help build his narrative. However, I do think that as far as what he was describing, he was probably like 80-90% accurate. It would be pretty hard if you asked me to describe what he got wrong in his 40-minute description of Israeli history. I would have to go back and watch it again in order to find what he got wrong, because I felt like he was more right than he was wrong in his descriptions. What I felt like was nefarious about it, which is probably the reason why Nick is so effective. What I felt was nefarious about it was the fact that he omitted massive historical context that would bolster the quote-unquote Israeli narrative. And then I felt like he was also lining up historical events in order to imply things that he didn't have the evidence for. Like Jack Rubenstein. Like, I obviously made a lot of hay out of Jack Ruby being a Jew. And then we fought about evidence with Groypers in chat about whether or not Jack Ruby said that he did it on behalf of the state of Israel as an Israeli Mossad operative, or if he was kind of like a schizo alcoholic who said, I did this to prove to the American people that Jews are tough. You know, like those are obviously two way different things based off of the same quote. So, yeah, but I understand why Nick is compelling, because this is a competent retelling of history, even if it's biased in his direction. Checking in with chat, though. KK says, the UK and US toppled Mossadegh, not the Shah. It was because Mossadegh was going to nationalize the oil industry, so Iran's oil revenue would benefit the Iranian people and not be exploited by the West. Sure, I agree. Although, you know, I hate socialism and communism, so, you know, we might disagree on that. Short Stack Goblin says, Nick is funny, but has horrible views. Oh my God, he's going to be the Republican candidate. Yeah. There's going to be an American first Nick Fuentes Christian nationalist candidate in the next decade for sure. Less than like 25% of international jihadists are Shia. Yep. Salafi and almost strictly Sunni Muslims. Yeah. UN is a Taqiyya fest. Bruh. Haircut Commander says, is Connor doing all right today? No, I'm hurt. I'm hurting. I need more caffeine and water and multivitamins. Bull Media says, I miss the days when Nick complained about black people and IQ while trying to hide his power level. Yeah, it's simpler days, right? Simpler days. Rob with a RAWB says, in many ways, politics has made me humorless. I recognize those descriptions are funny, but it's ruined for me coming from Nick. That sucks, man. That sucks. You need to regain your joie de vivre. You need to regain your childlike appreciation of silly humor from terrible people. General Balsack says, Nick learned words and doesn't know how to rationalize with his brain. No, I think he did okay. You could tell me how you feel like the words that he's not using accurately if you want to, but I felt like that was accurate. Haircut Commander says, Nick Fuentes Mardi Gras was probably a Klan rally with a maracas instead of tikis. I think that you guys assume he gets out more than he does. I think he hangs out at his parents' house, watches TV, and waits for the next stream. Bull Media Steel Dragon says, when Trump makes his NFT, I was laughing my ass off. True, classic. Christian Blair says, why does everyone use the World War III rhetoric? The only country that is directly dangerous to U.S. is Russia, who isn't opening up a war to defend Iran. Yeah, agreed. Rob says, speaking of parody, isn't Beasley a liberal talking head? Is this group trying to appear like something they aren't? You're talking about Luke Beasley? The Midas Touch pundit? Where did you see Luke Beasley? I didn't see him. All right, 2 or 3 more. Bohr says the caliber of this operation resembles more the preemptive strikes in the 67 war. Sure. Crawling Chaos says U.S. was all friendly with Saddam Hussein when Iraq was at war with Iran. Yeah, and then he attacked. It's like you don't even listen to my geopolitical rants, Crawling Chaos. And then Saddam has attacked Iran. Then he attacked Saudi, then he attacked Israel, and then he invaded Kuwait. It was pretty clear at that point that we shouldn't be friends with Saddam anymore. So, all right, let's go back.
If you look at the larger context, not just the past 12 days, not just the past 6 months, this is part of a much longer conflict. And I laid this out on the show last night. So if you want the comprehensive timeline, you can watch the show. We have been in open hostilities against Iran going back to at least 2018. Israel and the United States conducting joint operations goes back even further than that, goes back a long time. But it was in 2018, 7 years ago, that the United States declared Iran and their Revolutionary Guard a terrorist group. It was in 2019 that we were last in a shooting war with Russia, with Iran, where we're in a shooting war with Russia now. It was in 2019 that we were in a shooting war with Iran. Iran was accused of sabotaging oil tankers in the Persian Gulf. Iran shot down one of our drones. We were bombing Iranian facilities. They were attacking American troops. We assassinated their leader. We were in a shooting war with Russia throughout 2019 and 2020. That was 5 and 6 years ago. So what is the message of the ceasefire from yesterday? We're never going to bomb Iran again until the next time we bomb Iran.
True and based.
That's always been the message. In 2019, in 2020, Iran has retaliated for our assassination of Qasem Soleimani, so we're done bombing Iran forever until the next time we bomb Iran.
True and based.
And then in April 2024, Israel attacks Iran. The United States deploys to prevent Iran from going in. We're done engaging Iran until the next time we engage Iran. July 2024, Israel does an assassination in Tehran. We move in again with the carriers and the fighter jets and deploy infantry. Iran carries out a symbolic strike in October. Okay, phew, we averted catastrophe. We're done engaging Iran until the next time we bomb Iran. And then here we are again this year. Trump is pushing so hard for diplomacy. The Israelis are pushing so hard for war. And they tried repeatedly. They had designs to bomb Iran much sooner. They were talking about plans to bomb Iran in February, in March, in April, in May. It wasn't until June that they finally got the green light because Trump's 60-day deadline had expired that they carried it out.
This is only shocking if you do not understand the following quote. War is diplomacy by other means. Okay? This is from like Clausewitz. And I want to expand on this real quick because it is important. So indulge me a brief geopolitical rant. There are things in war that don't make sense. For instance, ceasefires. That during the World War I think that there was, this story actually made me sad. It made me like fucking sad. In World War I, there was a ceasefire that was declared eventually when like Germany was going to surrender. And people were fighting up until literally the 12th hour. It was like, let's say there were 12 hours left in the fighting. At 11:45, they were still shooting at each other. And there were kids, 18 to 20, well, realistically, it's World War I. So it's like 15 to 22-year-old kids who were still getting killed at that time. And I'm just thinking to myself, how bad does it have to fucking suck to get drafted into World War I, to get sent to the front line, to sit there with the front line for years, moving inches, losing tens of thousands of young men, to fight until the last minute, and then to be the last casualty of the war? Because there was one last casualty of the war, which sucks. That doesn't make sense. Why would you fight until the last hour if you knew peace was coming up? The only way that war makes sense is if it's diplomacy by other means, which basically means that all of this is negotiation between great powers. All of this is negotiation between political figures. War is just an extension of diplomacy, where if you can't come up with a peaceful resolution, then you use guns. That's the only way that any of this makes sense. And so that's where warriors, like, you know, I served with warriors. I was in the Marine Corps. Warriors understand war. They don't understand diplomacy or politics, or few of them do. And so what warriors care about is they care about mastering the battlefield, harnessing technology to the maximal degree possible, and then destroying the enemy as aggressively as possible. But that might not match up with diplomatic goals. As an example, no warrior would have signed up for the Sunni awakening in 2008, because the Sunni awakening in 2008 was effectively the Sunnis in Western Iraq getting sick of fighting coalition forces and being willing to come to the table and saying, hey, if you pay us, we'll run our own domestic security. There is no soldier or Marine that would have voluntarily signed up for that. They would have been like, no, you were trying to kill us yesterday. You're going to backstab us as soon as possible. We're just going to kill you. We're just going to keep fighting and killing you. But the American government said, yeah, we're sick of burning treasure and burning American lives. Therefore, we will pay you to run your own security so we can get the hell out of this country. So anyways, I hope you can appreciate war is diplomacy by other means, and to understand it any differently is cope. KK says, why do you hate socialism? Because the decommodification of basic human needs and workers owning the means of production can only be instantiated by a state that is so powerful that it can run every single aspect of your life. Command economies don't work. Authoritarianism doesn't work. We have dozens, maybe hundreds, maybe thousands of examples throughout history of authoritarianism breaking down through its own internal contradictions. And so as a result, maximal human freedom is the only way forward. Mixed economy capitalism is probably the best of both worlds. That's why I hate socialism. Moving on.
In 2 weeks, Israel achieved a lot of their objectives, but not all of them. They sue for peace. Trump claims victory. Iran wants a de-escalation. And now everybody is so quick to say, oh, okay, mission accomplished. We did it. It's over.
Crawling Chaos says, I do listen to you, but you are so damn defensive. I was just stating a fact while you talked about Iran, Iraq. Well, listen, I'm under-caffeinated and I'm grumpy today, so my apologies.
This isn't a problem anymore. And by the way, not only is this not a problem, but zoom out. The whole situation isn't a problem. We're not in World War
Hi from Bumbly.
III because we have a tentative ceasefire, which appears to be more of a understanding than an actual agreement in the context of every other conflict happening on every other continent. Suffice to say, we are in World War III. We have been in World War III. What else would you call this? And John Mearsheimer said this.
By this definition, though, we've been in World War III since the end of World War II. An assessment that I would effectively agree with, by the way. World War III, so World War I was a national level war in Europe. World War II, well, actually, there was international components as well. So it was an international war. Same thing with World War II. World War III has been ongoing since the end of World War II, and it's effectively a Cold War to prevent a hot World War III. I think that's true.
This is an interesting figure. And by figure, I don't mean him. I mean the statistic. Mearsheimer was on The Judge the other day, Judge Napolitano, great show. And he said that in the first 2 years of World War II in the European theater from 1939 until 1941, and that comprises Hitler's invasion of Poland, Hitler's invasion of France, taking over France, many of the hostilities that took place on the continent that are famous. He said until 1941, fewer people had died in World War II than have died so far in Ukraine alone. This is the deadliest shooting war on the European continent since World War II. China is clearly testing the waters in Taiwan, and there is debate about whether they're ever going to make the move against Taiwan, but certainly they're menacing the island. Certainly they're moving to project power with trade and with their naval force. You have North Korea.
What is this sentence? Churchill's post-World War II naval blockade of Germany led to 1 million post-war deaths. What the fuck are you talking about, man? So Germany is a landlocked nation in Europe. The Soviets owned all of Eastern Europe and Germany. They had roads into Germany. What are you talking about? West Germany was in Allied control. Bread and circuses, that is the craziest sentence I have ever read. What are you talking about, man? Churchill naval blockade of Germany post-World War II? 39 to 45. Yeah, there was no naval blockade of Germany by Britain after World War II. What the hell are you talking about, man? I'm going to show you Germany just in case, because this is like, I'm like worried about you. I'm worried about what you said. Just in case. We're actually taking time out of the stream to make sure that like Bread and Circuses doesn't have schizophrenia. Okay. After World War II, this was all controlled by the Allies. So we could ship in food, water, medicine, whatever we wanted into Germany, and we controlled West Germany. Russia controlled Eastern Europe and Eastern Germany. And if we did a naval blockade, we would block like a very small segment of the coast and here. But these are not the areas in which Germany gets the majority of its trade. So I need you to look at your screen and confirm that you don't have schizophrenia. That is like a crazy comment to make.
Fighting inside Russia. Russia is the strategic partner of North Korea. And now we're in a war with Iran, which just ended apparently 12 or 24 hours ago. And people like Crowder want to say, see, you were wrong. This isn't World War III. It's all good. It's all fine. It's not all good. It's not all fine. And by the way, me saying that doesn't mean I don't want it to be fine. I'm rooting for Trump. I want world peace. It terrifies me, the prospect of a nuclear conflict, an armed conflict with Russia and China. The risk of this, the threat of this, is very real. And it is scary. And I want Trump to resolve the war in Ukraine. I want him to resolve the conflict in the Middle East. I want him to resolve tensions with China. Being concerned about it doesn't mean I don't want that to happen. Being concerned about that doesn't.
Yeah, and actually, this is what I don't like about the sanitization of Nick's rhetoric. So let's go ahead and take a look at this. Ukraine maps. So Nick is pro-Russia. Nick is trying to, quote unquote, normalize relations with China. Nick wants to not have war with Iran. So I want to point something out to you. The Americas are physically secure. We got Alaska, Canada, United States, Central and South America. In Central and South America, we're not at war with. They just have a bunch of like failed narco states, right? And what I mean by that is Venezuela is a failed state. Despite having a third of the world's proven oil reserves, they still managed to somehow screw that up through socialism. Cuba is a little communist state, but, who cares? Whatever. It's not actually like a geopolitical threat. And then these areas are known for crime and violence, but they're also incredibly rich in resources. And so Central and South America could stabilize and could become like powerful economic and geopolitical and security partners with the United States. Here's me in Central Florida. So we don't face a lot of threats in the Americas. But in Eurasia, there's all sorts of crazy shit going on. And we have allies of what we would call the free world. I would consider the free world mixed economy capitalist and like liberal democratic, right? They try to be free, maximally free. They try to have input from their own people and how the government operates. I would view that as, and Republican means just like rule of law, right? Rule of law and representative democracy. I would say that a majority of Europe falls into some part of that like political spectrum. Africa faces similar problems to Central and South America with corruption, and there are jihadist terrorists in Africa, particularly in North Africa. But then this is really why we keep fighting over this region, is because 1/3 of the world's proven oil reserves are right here. 1/3 are right here. And it's like Game of Thrones where everybody is backstabbing each other all the time. My problem with Nick saying that he wants to normalize relations with Russia and China is what he's saying is Iran, despite being a theocratic authoritarian regime with 1/3 of the proven oil reserves, and it's the energy reserve for, I know Russia has their own energy reserves, but I'm just saying a lot of the petroleum and natural gas goes into Russia, and same thing with China, is that this hemisphere of the world isn't mixed economy capitalist. They aren't liberal democracies. They aren't republics. China is the last bulwark of communism, even though some people would argue they're state capitalist at this. And then Russia is a kleptocratic oligarchical fucking shithole that still has fantasies of imperium from the USSR period. So like normalization with China just means conceding Asia to China, including Taiwan. So it means condemning tens of millions of people to falling into one of the most authoritarian dictatorial police states in history. And then it also just means allowing Russia to be a kleptocratic oligarchical shithole that then reasserts, its power within the Baltics and Ukraine and Poland. And to that I say, fuck that. I don't have the capacity nor the will to concede tens of millions of souls back into Russian influence. I don't have the desire or the will to concede tens of millions of people in Taiwan to one of the most dystopian regimes to ever fucking exist ever in China. So for Nick is using very sanitized language in order to talk about peace. And what I'm saying is he wants to concede tens of millions of people into authoritarian dictatorship shitholes. Matter of fact, let's check the population of Taiwan. $23 million people. Yeah, I'm not going to say 23 million people deserve to be enslaved by the CCP. You can go fuck yourself, Nick.
Doesn't mean I'm not rooting for Trump to succeed. But you have these people on social media, and it seems like the concern for them is more about protecting their defense of the status quo. There is a status quo that has driven us into the conflict in Iran. There is a status quo that is driving us into a conflict with China, and on with everything else. And you have these people like Crowder. They were totally caught off guard. They're talking about Democrat activists kicking Trump yard signs. They're talking about woke Disney movies. They're talking about a metric ton of bullshit. And then when something real happens and it's not on their radar and they're caught totally off guard, and because they know nothing about what to...
All right, listen, I'm going to argue with my chat real quick. Germany isn't landlocked. Yeah, it has like 500 miles of fucking coastline. Y'all know what I'm saying. You know what I'm saying.
To say about it. They don't know the stakes. They say, oh, because they don't understand it. Well, the woke right, they're just trafficking in controversy for the sake of controversy. They're saying we're entering World War III for the algorithm. No, we're saying World War III because we're in World War III.
Yeah, but we've been in World War III since 1946, Nick. And World War III has been nowhere near as bad as World War II or I.
There is war on every continent. This is an inflection point. America is at its weakest point relative to the other powers.
Yeah, and you want to make it weaker.
Than at any time since the end of the Cold War.
Oh, yeah, you're so full of shit. Dude, yeah, okay, we're at our weakest point since the end of the Cold War, but the 1990s and the early thousands was probably our strongest position ever. Because we didn't have 20 years of the war on terror. We didn't have a war footing. We didn't have 125% debt to GDP. We didn't have any of that kind of crap. So as a result, yeah, right before 9/11 was the best it ever was as far as like an American geostrategic positioning. But that doesn't mean that we could have maintained that in perpetuity. I don't know what this position is. Like, should we have just gotten attacked on 9/11 and then just maintained an isolationist posture because we wanted to make sure that we had our eye on the geopolitical ball? That's crazy. The best I would have argued is that we should have continued sanctions and diplomacy against Iraq until eventually it collapsed, and we should have just invaded Afghanistan. That's the maximum I'm willing to concede to this worldview.
We're in a new age. And anyway, so I saw that and I said, that's just got to be the dumbest thing I've ever heard. And it's such a shame that so many Trump supporters, patriots, they're following Fox News, they're following Daily Wire, they're following Steven Crowder and The Blaze, and they're just getting this slop. And that's why 87% of Republicans supported the strike. Do you know that? Do not ever make the mistake of thinking we are in the majority. We are not. Okay? Even though it might seem like that on Twitter, even though it might seem like that on Instagram, even though it might seem like that with young people, this is a big country with a lot of boomers and a lot of other television viewers, a lot of NPCs, a lot of sitcom humor robots. 87% of Republicans supported Trump strikes on Iran. 87%.
Seems like you're in the minority there, Nick.
So for these people like Crowder and Mark Levin and Sean Hannity,
60% of Germany is maritime. Get the fuck out of here. Sorry, you guys are pissing me off. 60% of Germany is maritime. Germany, Google Maps. You're telling me this is Denmark right here. Almost a third of the border of Germany on the northern side isn't even coastline because it's Denmark. What are you talking about, man? Google. How much of Germany is coastal? 1,400 miles is coastal. Remember that. 1,500 miles. How long is the German border? Bullshit. It's not 4,000. The German border is 4,000 miles. No, that's not what I'm talking about. How do I describe this so Google actually picks it up? How long is the entire German border? No, it's not 2,300 miles. It also keeps showing east versus not the inner German border. Germany has a total of 1,500 and 2,300. What? I'm going to lose my fucking mind. I'm going to lose my mind. But am I crazy? Sorry, I know this is like an aside. Let's do the math on it real quick. 1484 plus 2307 is 3791. So 1484 into 3791 is 39. So it's 40%, not 60%. And then, oh my God, they include all the lengths. Czech Republic, Austria, Denmark, Poland, Switzerland, Belgium, France, Luxembourg, Netherlands, Sweden. So apparently this is accurate. So 39% of it. So what's all this then? What's this? What's this border? Are you saying that this is German? Are they including this in German coastline? I'm gonna lose my shit. All right, whatever. I will accept that 39% of the German border is maritime if you include its border with the Netherlands. But I hate you. I hate you for proving me wrong.
They're always kvetching and hand-wringing about the woke right and about anti-Semites. They are still the dominant force. They are still the establishment. They are still the status quo. And they're still defenders of the status quo and the regime. And the people like us telling the truth, giving you the information, the real red pills, explaining the situation, the history, the facts, the information that you don't hear on these controlled, centralized corporate media outlets. You know, we're still very much in the resistance here. We're very much in the opposition. So I saw that today and I'm like, wow, this is what they're going with. Now the establishment is going to call.
Okay, short stack goblin corrects is something saying 60% of German trade is maritime. Okay, that's fine. I'll accept that.
Coalesce and say, oh, this was a big success. And you can see it already. They're saying Trump succeeded. He took out Iran's nuclear program, prevented a war. We got in, we got out. He's
perimeter.
A smart president. Everything's fine. And it's just shocking how little people have learned over the past 30 years.
Guys, it's still saying, it's still bringing up the approximate issues. The only reason why, I'm sorry for having autism and fighting about the German border. The only reason why I'm going to take my L. Okay, I'll take an L and I'll happily take an L. Listen, it's going to happen sometimes. You guys have 3,000 IQ. I have 3,000 IQ. And so as a result, we're going to disagree on some things and we're going to have to fight it out. So what's shocking to me, though, is I would not consider this a maritime border right here. Take a look at this. Okay, but my mouse cursor is moving across the map and I'm moving across the western, southern, and eastern border of Germany. That easily looks, in my opinion, to be 75%, 80% of the border looks to be on land. Then, even when it comes to the northwest border, to me, it looks like, I'm not saying that I'm correct, I'm saying it looks like even the northern border kind of cuts out for the Netherlands and for Denmark. And so if I was just eyeballing it, it doesn't even look like Germany has like this territory, which I would not consider maritime, right? But if you look over here, stop it. If you look over here, there is a healthy chunk of coastline right here. And then if you were to include this, I could see how this would be 30% of Germany's whatever, like their perimeter border. However, it's just not intuitive. It's not intuitive to me at all. So I'll take my L. I'll admit that Germany cares more about water power than, I gave them credit for. I'll admit that Hamburg is 60% of their trade. Maritime trade is 60% of the way that Germans get their goods and services. That is fine. It's fine. I'm happy to take the L. You learn something new every day. In reference to the actual topic, though, I'm going to kind of do an outro and a summary. Nick Fuentes is, I don't want to say correct, but he's right to say that there's a real difference between Conservative Inc. Incorporated, kind of the mainstream normie conservative palatable narrative, and the dissident right that is calling out the Israel-Iran conflict and is effectively saying that we're on the verge of entering World War III. However, I think Con Inc. is more accurate because even within this description, Nick Fuentes was saying that we've basically been in World War III since to him, the end of the Cold War. I would almost say that the Cold War was World War III, and we're kind of in World War 3.5. But the whole point of World War III is to make sure that World War III doesn't happen. And so if you're willing to have this like 3,000 IQ, crazy, like astronaut level analysis of geopolitics, I understand what Nick was saying, but I think he's way too confident and he's not giving the opposition enough credit. Then I would also say that calling Tim Pool's fans a bunch of sweaty mozzarella sticks was hysterical, as was calling, what's his face? Steven Crowder, like a golden retriever moron, was also hilarious. So good job, Nick Fuentes. Interesting segment. Thank you for sharing. I parasocially love you. Thank you for hanging out on the stream. And I hope you had a good time. And I will see you tomorrow. All right. Bye, guys. Have a good one.